I wasn't clinically diagnosed until I was in my late 30s, but I had symptoms my entire life. And as a child, I had symptoms of weakness, pain. Doctors would say, well, it's growing pains. And the reason why she doesn't want to really walk is because she has pain. And I couldn't really walk at one point without either holding on to something or with crutches. And we just accepted that it was these growing pains. It started to get worse. And the episodes became more debilitating, but they didn't happen all the time. So I always assumed, and my family always assumed, that it was just the flu. You know, you feel weak or run down because you've been doing too much. And, you know, if you just rest and take it easy for a couple of days, yeah, I would start to feel better. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s when it started to become very debilitating, to the point where I was having problems lifting a cup up to my mouth. Until it got to a point in my early 30s where it was happening a lot more often, and I was having so much difficulty on a regular basis that we started to look a little bit more into it. And then after we started looking into it, it was as if the rug just got pulled out one day and I went fully paralyzed and I could not move at all. And I ended up going to the ER, and by the time I got to the ER, I could move, but it was not coordinated. I couldn't stand on my own still. They ended up doing a spinal tap. I was in the hospital for 9 days, and they couldn't figure it out. Then they thought, because I started getting facial palsy, they thought, okay, she's had a stroke. And so they did all of that, and it ended up not being that. And so they discharged me and said, okay, we want you to go to Mayo Clinic. And so I went to Mayo Clinic. They had no idea, and that went on for about a year. I was in a wheelchair most of the time, and I was having a great deal of difficulty even doing like personal hygiene stuff like brushing my hair, brushing my teeth. And I ended up somehow, something in my blood work, which now we know had nothing to do with my periodic paralysis, but had me end up at an immunologist's office. And he took a look at my stuff, and he thought maybe it was MS. And so he sent me to the MS specialist in our area. He looked at everything and said, I don't think it's MS, but I want to send you to a movement specialist. So I went to the movement specialist at Shands, and that's when I was first clinically diagnosed. The challenging part was finding a doctor that had even heard of periodic paralysis so that they knew how to treat me. Well, I was fortunate enough that my neurologist that had sent me to Shands, he was familiar with periodic paralysis because he actually had another patient who had hypokalemic periodic paralysis. So he had asked the other patient, is it okay if he connected the two of us? And she agreed, and she was on the board of the Periodic Paralysis Association, and she introduced me to that organization. And I went to my first conference within that first year. Before I had gone to the conference, she had told me about a video that was on YouTube of one of the patients that has hypokalemic periodic paralysis having an episode. And she said, you might want to check it out. And I went online and I looked at it, and it was very emotional for me because that was definitely my paralysis episodes. The other amazing thing about that first conference was meeting other people and hearing their stories, and hearing that their stories were very similar to mine. It helped me realize that I wasn't alone.